Good afternoon and welcome to today's Onboard webinar. My name is Robert Donald. I'm part of the client success team here at Chaikin Analytics. And the purpose of this webinar is really to give you a basic understanding of the platform, primarily for new members, but certainly anybody looking for a refresher is welcome to join. Once you get through the onboard and learn the basics of navigation, if you haven't already been contacted by your client success manager, simply click on the question mark icon here, which will open up a support ticket and just ask for, in the text box, a one-on-one with your client success manager. Ticket will be put into our help desk system and tracked so that if your client success manager happens to be on vacation, somebody else will fill in for them. While we're on the topic of client success in general, telephone support's available between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. We encourage you to use telephone support. If you call in, you're not bothering us. It is our job. And oftentimes, it's not as efficient or as effective to resolve something through email because you'll express an issue, we'll have a question, you'll express an issue, and all of a sudden it's back and forth, and 2 hours later, we're a phone call. We can tend to resolve things pretty quickly. For the most part, a problem you're experiencing is likely to be with your device, not our servers. However, that's not to say that we never have trouble. We do it occasionally. I would encourage you, especially as you're learning the platform, to call us. If you look at a chart, you think maybe there's a trade there for you. We can't give you any investment advice because we're not licensed to do so. However, we can certainly interpret a chart and give you our opinion on what the underlying security may be doing, and you can then apply that insight to your trade, and hopefully it works out well for you. But remember, our job is exclusively to help you be successful, because the more successful you are, obviously the more likely you are to retain your subscription. There's a lot of things that are part of your membership in addition to the software itself. And I want to make sure I call this out. I've found them to be very useful during my time here. First and foremost is Market Insights. It's a weekly newsletter put out Sunday afternoon by Mark Chaikin. It gives Mark's thoughts on the market over the preceding week and some ideas moving into the next week. Generally includes a screen and a recommended stock. Now, the stock may not be right for you, but the value of Mark's commentary and insight is certainly something worth paying attention to. I know working for him for the past 15 months, I've certainly learned a lot. Also, Dan Russo has several different touch points. First and foremost is his Morning Insights email, where he gives his outlook on the market on a particular day. In different days of the week, he covers different topics on a recurring basis. One of my favorites is his Tuesday sector rotation discussions. And I've found them to be very useful and very profitable for the most part. Dan also does a few other things that I should call your attention to. First is something brand new. Every Friday, I clicked on the microphone icon, and I'll show it again. Dan puts out a video with his observations and commentary over the course of a given week. So certainly I would encourage you to open that up. I found it very useful today. He addressed where he believes the market is. I don't want to steal all Dan's thunder, although plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery. He's looking at a range-bound market. He talks a little bit about the yield curve inversion, or the recent yield curve inversion. Certainly, I got a lot out of it. And as with most things with Dan, constant learning exercise. He also does something daily for Stock Market Today, which you can access through this link. Now, this page here also has market and morning insights. So, if you're a member and you don't receive the email in the morning, first of all, that's cause to call us. We don't necessarily know if everybody receives things, and it can be any number of problems. And we'll help you work through them. But to access all of Dan's content online, simply click on the light bulb and everything is there. We control when we send email. What we can't control is when your email or internet service provider actually delivers it. I do have a question. Yes, you should be receiving Dan's emails automatically. I would go ahead and click on the question mark and open a ticket on that. And we'll look into why you're not receiving them. And there's a second question. I just see you logo on the screen. I'm not sure what that means. If you can clarify, are you having trouble viewing the screen? What you should be seeing is actually a chart within Chaikin. If you're having trouble with your screen, it looks like everybody is. All right, I would try a screen refresh. And I am going to restart the screen sharing. And hopefully through the combination of those two things, you'll see a chart with XLRE appearing. And okay, so not sure what went on with that one. Likely somehow or another, my Zoom stopped sharing my screen. So if that would happen again, do let me know through the chart or through the chat or the Q&A. So I'm going to take all questions are answered and keep going. I do apologize for that little hiccup. I usually save the hiccups for when I work from home. Anyway, so back to this icon opens up this frame, which shows you market insights, morning insights, stock market today, and also member content, which is actually a duplication of what is under this microphone. The microphone icon is controlled by client success. There are no sales messages in there. We try to post content several times a week. And a lot of the content we post is based on our conversations with you, the members. If we notice, a trend or we notice a certain theme, we'll try to address it. We'll try to put in hints about how to use the system, sort of tips and tricks. So if your microphone's red, probably worth looking into. Excuse me. Also want to show you product resources. Now this is the access to our members only sessions. The members only sessions are all of our content, our recurring content that we prepare and curate specifically for the use of all of our members. The Monday Open Forum is certainly a favorite. And you saw what I did, I assume, of just, well, I'll do it again. Let's see. I click a screen refresh, it'll take me back to the beginning. Okay, so you have this calendar of events here. Click on any one of the events, and you'll be taken right down to it. It's a little bit high and outside on the pitch. I've got to talk to our programmer. He needs to land it a line or two sooner, but you don't need to pre-register for webinars. Our licensing is now such that we can accommodate every single member joining this. While you're certainly free to register, it will send you an email invitation almost immediately. If you don't see it in your inbox, look in your spam folder. The software that's behind this is not Chaikin software. And even if I would try to register for an email for a webinar, it would be delivered to my spam. So clearly it's not the best written piece of software in the world. You can also view past recordings. Simply clicking over here, and it'll take you to a YouTube page that has all of the past open forums. Each open forum has a particular topic, and probably worth looking at. Money flow in depth was a great one. Mark, speaking of the trade wars, I mean, anytime you can get Mark's view on the market, probably a good thing. Reviewing risk was another very popular one that Dan did, but these are all available for you to consume at your leisure. So that was, just a couple of general things mostly for new members. I think existing members know that we do all of our testing on Google Chrome. So while we fully support Google Chrome, we also we run in Firefox, we run in Microsoft Edge, we run in Apple Safari, but it's preferable that you run in Google for the simple reason that's where we do all of our testing. If you ever have any kind of issue with your browser, it's more likely than not that we've seen it before. Quick phone call into us, and it's usually only a fast tweak of your sessions and your settings, and you're on your way. So again, don't hesitate to call us. Don't think you're being a pain in the neck. We're here, and Mark has made the investment in supporting our members because it's good for both the members and the organization. We also recommend you don't use ad blocking software. If you use ad blocking software, you're almost guaranteed to have problems. Especially the free ad blocking software. It's often said you get what you pay for. So if you paid nothing for something, it's likely to be worth nothing. And with ad blocking software, you will see options play won't run consistently, and you may have trouble actually with the program. If you really feel a need to run ad blocking software, we can help you whitelist, or we can provide some support in whitelisting Chaikin's site. We're not a big enough company to support other people's software. So let's go ahead and dive into the platform. If you're a brand new user, the first thing that you want to do most likely is to start putting lists together, watch list, a list of your holdings. So let's talk at a very high level about lists. There's a default list called My Stocks, and everybody has it. Now, the one thing that's unique about My Stocks is you have to have one symbol in there. So even the first time you loaded Chaikin Analytics, you probably had a symbol in there. Now, it was one of ours. It's a backfill. You can certainly replace it. But My Stocks is always going to have a symbol, and you can't delete My Stocks because it's your default list. What I use My Stocks for is I use it for stocks that I am thinking of trading in over the next 5 to 7 trading days. I don't keep my long-term holdings there. I keep them somewhere else. These are all stocks that I'm considering doing some trading. Now, as you can also see, I don't have a huge list. A lot of that is my own personal preference. The data's there. The data changes. And keeping a stock and a bunch of watch lists isn't really going to help you, because every day we run the data. Every day there are changes to the underlying data, and what may look like a good trade today might look like a horrible trade by next Thursday for whatever reason. So as such, I don't keep lists around. Rather, I think about the attributes of a stock that I believe will meet the needs of a trade I'm considering. And by thinking of those attributes and being comfortable with those attributes, I can use the screener tool. I can use discovery. I can use Etf Comparison, and I can identify a current tradable idea. A stock that's tradable now, not 3 weeks from now, now. It's very difficult to monitor the entire S&P 500. We've got plenty of storage on our servers, so I tend to keep my list very short. So let's, in terms of lists in general, it's very easy. Other list I have is this is a screener alerts list. And this represents an alert on my save screener. My save screener, and I'll get into that when we talk about screener. My save screener was a variation of the bullish swing trade starter screen. And I'll talk about starter screens in a fairly short time. I don't like to spend a lot of time on navigation, but there are some basics that we need to address. Now, this screening list is a list that was generated by the screener and saved as the workspace. Now, you can see I can delete the screener alert list. See ya. Now, it will come back tomorrow or the next trading day after it runs the screener, but I can delete that list anytime I want to. So let's talk about lists in general. A couple of ways to create a list. The first way is to import the list. You can see I click the gear icon. I bring up a dialog box, something I'm sure you've also have seen before. And it may be no surprise, but I do have a list prepared. Now, you notice my file or my list name is jackstocks.csv, and that just means comma separated variables or values. So it's just telling the computer how the data is arrayed. The file name matches the list name. If I wanted to change this right here, I could. I could change it to something different. So I'll go ahead and click next. Now, what this will give you a little view into what the import file looks like. It's simply look at it in terms of an Excel file with the symbols all in a row down column A, just that easy. No bold, no underline, no italicized, upper or lowercase doesn't matter, just the symbols all in a single column. Save that file, and you can save it as an Excel file if you want. You can save it as an XLS, the current version of Excel. We can still import those files and know how to treat them. So I'm going to go ahead and say import, and the system will do a little thinking in the background. It's currently lost in thought. Okay, now it's thinking. And you can see up here, I've got a list, pardon me, called Jack Stocks. The list matches the file name for my import. Now, the other thing that I can do if I want to is I can create a new list. And I'll go ahead and call this list Goose's Stocks. I'm going to go ahead and click enter. Now, enter is how you create this list. Now you can see it makes a list called Goose's Stocks. You can see here, and this blue denotes an active list, and at the header denotes that this is the active list itself. So now the next thing I would have to do is actually populate this list. Now I can search for, I can actually just input a symbol right there. Two choices here. I can click the workstation icon or I can click the plus sign. If I click the plus sign, I add the stock to my list and display it on my workspace view. So I'll go ahead, and now the other thing I can do is I can also spell out the name. I didn't know Walmart's symbol off the top of my head, so I started to spell it until it prompted me with WMT. Same deal, I'll go ahead and put it in here. And it's an interesting rating. As you can see, I'm adding stocks to the list. Oh, in that case, I didn't add it. If you think he added it, I must have clicked just the workspace icon. You can just click here, and it will add it to my stocks. Well, that's not where I wanted it, though. So when you find out you made a mistake like that, just go add it somewhere else. There's JP Morgan on this list, Duke stock. So I think that you probably got that grasp by now. So the next thing I want to talk about is some of the attributes and qualities of a list. We did mention my stocks as a default list. I should mention again that you are not capped in the number of lists you can have. You can have quite a few lists. If you're an advisor, we recognize that you likely have different clients or model portfolios. Maybe you're managing multiple portfolios as an individual, maybe with certainly taxable and tax exempt. Maybe you have additional fuller portfolios for children or grandchildren. So a question popped up of how do you add a stock to the list? I don't know if it's a few minutes old. I think I covered it, but just in case. Go ahead and type in the symbol. And to add it to the list, I simply click here. Click the plus sign, and Microsoft is put on the list. I can also add it from this view by clicking on the same plus sign right underneath there. So every list in Chaikin has something called a power bar. It appears at the top here. And what it is it's a reflection of the number of bullish, neutral, and bearish stocks in any given list. Why it's useful is basically if you have a list that has a greater portion of bullish stocks, a greater ratio of bullish to bearish stocks, that list will likely outperform a stock with a higher ratio of bearish stocks to bullish stocks. So it's really meant to be a quick and dirty look, almost that you can do just on the visual itself as opposed to drilling into the data. As you can see from this list, my stocks is a pretty robust and bullish list. So you would, believe that this list would likely outperform, say, this list where I have 0 bullish, 2 neutral, and 1 bearish. So that's what the power bar does. Every list within Chaikin has one. And where it comes in handy is, for example, here, when I'm looking at Zacks Industries. By opening this up, looking at the power gauge rating, I can view on the fly what industries, based on Zacks classifications, are doing best or having the strongest performance in the market. I could also turn it on its head and go in and look for the worst industries if I was doing a bearish trade. Remember, everything that we do can be flipped over between bullish and bearish. There are some nuances, and we're happy in client success to explain those nuances to you. Now, you can also manipulate stocks in a list. Couple of functions right from the list. You can select all, and then you can export this list. And what it's doing is exporting the list as mystocks.csv, and it will actually appear in the download section of my Windows computer. So if you do use Chaikin for idea generation, and that's really what we are, as an idea generation platform, you could take those stocks that pass your screen, and whatever your criteria is, we don't judge, and you could then export that flat file out into Tastytrade or out into your brokerage account to access any additional data that may be available to you under that account. We are primarily fundamental, and maybe you want to look at deeper technicals through your brokerage account. Obviously completely up to you, but that's an easy way to do it, is to use the export function. You can also use the right-click approach, to simply delete a stock. Well, I got to do a different one. And that's that's basically what keeps your list going. If I wanted to copy a couple of stocks, I certainly can. And I'll do it by highlighting the symbols. Then I'll do copy. And once this list is up, I'll do paste, and I can move all of those stocks from my stocks into the list Goose's stocks. I also, while I have this, wanted to show you a little something. Notice how the file is arrayed. It's arrayed by power gauge rating. It's obviously not arrayed in alphabetical order, because that's not in alphabetical order. As you probably know about the power gauge, there are a series of ratings starting with very bullish to neutral plus to neutral minus, from neutral minus to bearish, and that's it, basically. And it's important to mention neutral plus and neutral minus and contrast them to neutral itself. Neutral, with no plus or minus associated with it, simply means that as a result of our process, remember our process is to run the same data against or analyze the same things based on daily trade data. So we're doing a repeatable process. Oftentimes, it's easier for our members just to go and flat out make copies of these lists. You may want to have, for example, if you want alerts through email, you should have all your stocks listed in My Stocks. And you do that by copying between lists. For example, I could take and copy every ticker from the file Jack Stocks, drag it over and drop it in My Stocks, and that way, everything that I'm taking a look at, I can get an email alert on. The email alert functionality is exceptionally useful, and I'll discuss that in just a second. I want to do a little bit more on the power bar. Now, as you can see from this power bar, I've got 7 bullish, 3 bearish, 10 neutrals. Now, I also said just a few minutes ago that there's several different flavors of neutral. there is regular neutral right here. That means we're not sure of directionality. That's all. We have neutral minus right here and neutral plus right here. So I would make the argument that there really are 7 more bullish stocks than what the list shows. And that's just a reflection of the nuances across this power gauge rating. We do believe that it is important to call out a bullish stock trading below its long-term average or a bearish stock trading above its long-term average, because either of those data points could indicate a price change. It won't necessarily always indicate a price change, but it's possible that it would. And for that reason, we need to make it easy to work with that sort of thing. So let's move right into setting alerts up. Go ahead and click our alert bell up here, and you better click it square, and you'll be presented with this menu. If you turn screener alerts on, you have to have a screen saved, and you have to be able to select it, or you're going to cause the whole program to bomb out because it'll basically halt. You're not telling the system what it thinks it should be hearing. So turn all these to on, click next, and covered call screen is one that I made up. And I don't think it's actually how I have set mine. Now, I have a series of screens saved on my device, so I can go find one easily. For you to get the full benefit of this supplemental functionality, you do have to save a screen and have it in your system. For alerts on my stocks, I have everything checked. And I do that predominantly because I tend to keep my stocks as a fairly tidy list without a bunch of extra junk in it. So once I've done that, I'll go to next. Now I'll take alerts on an index. Now, personally, I use this for idea generation, plain and simple. Why would I want to look through the news on 500 reports to see if any particular stock's moving when I got a computer to do that for me while I'm sleeping? So I use out of the S&P 500. I only use my favorite 2 signals: oversold buy, overbought sell. I'm sorry, I had some input from somebody today who also suggested relative strength buy and relative strength sell. Also check earnings surprise revisions and power gauge alerts. And that's all that I check. My objective is to have an email that's manageable. So not having a watch list full of 100,000 stocks and not checking everything under SPY for my alerts. What I'm hoping to do is keep my life as organized as I possibly can. All right, so let's talk about the different views in the platform. You have the standard watch list view where you're seeing the symbol or the ticker, you're seeing all the data. You also have a tile view where you can see where everybody is at a given point in time and whether or not anything's wrong with them. And finally, you have the alerts view. So what this does, I'll engage it at a good place. All right, so for the list my stocks, this is the list of alerts that fall within my stock. So that's one way to do alerts. And that would be in case you wanted to look at these alerts separately during the course of a workday. You wouldn't have to worry about anybody asking why you're at a different workstation or why you're working so closely with somebody else. Once you're done in the alerts view, go ahead and click the hidden view, and it returns you back to the worksheet mode. So let's talk about the chart itself. One of the first things I did, and I don't know if anybody caught it, was a little tweak to the underlying display of the power gauge itself. First thing I did was get in touch with my captain and invite her to come critique me personally, which she did. So I always like to take and open up this icon right here. The reason being is it gives me access to additional data within Chaikin. So let's talk about a little bit of let's talk a little bit about what's on the rest of the chart. Now, right here is your power gauge rating. If you click this down arrow, it drops down this additional data field. So this is also a great opportunity to talk about the difference in power gauge ratings between stocks and ETFs. ETFs are rated a little bit differently. We do use a bottom-up approach. We rate an ETF by virtue of the underlying constituents in the ETF. Makes perfect sense, right? ETF is nothing but a basket of stocks. So by rating and evaluating the individual stocks, we're going to be a little bit more granular on how that ETF is likely to perform. So we have three components of the power gauge rating. First is the technical rank. And that's a rank of the technicals as that ETF compares to the universe of covered U.S. equity ETFs. Second item, U.S. equity power gauge ratings, refers to the individual stocks in the ETF. That number is not weighted, so would not necessarily pick up the full impact of a certain ETF being overweighted in any given single stock. The final is the U.S. equity ETF's power gauge is weighted, where that third one actually weights the positions and their power gauges in the overall calculation of the power gauge rating for the ETF. Finally, over in this box, and this box, much like in the stock field, you do have a little bit of background on the ETF itself. Okay, working the rest of the way through the chart, and I'll go ahead and close this back up to free up some room. You have this icon as a little question mark, and it gives you, click on it, gives you a little blurb about the company you're looking at. Moving across, you have the functionality to add this particular symbol to any list in the platform. And you can see my lists are all listed right there. And all right, so you have the symbol here, you have the current price, you have a reflection of the power bar, you have an options tab, and you have an EPS tab. Moving down to the next line, and this is consistent across stocks and ETFs, you have an intraday chart Shows what that ETF's been doing during the course of the trading day, because as we're aware, an ETF trades without necessarily spousal involvement. You have the option to switch from a 1-year chart here back to his 5-year chart. And whichever one's blue is the one that's active. And that gives you an answer on the long-term trend. I prefer the 1-year approach myself. And what you'll, then here's the crosshairs right here. Click on them. It brings up the crosshairs, including data that enables you to look for patterns in the software predicting future changes in the market. Then you have the raw values of overbought, oversold. And all in all, not a bad looking chart. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the data. Hold for one. What you have here is upper and lower bands. Consider them to be like Bollinger Bands. This line right here, as it moves through her body, is the 21-day moving average. This copper or orange line is the 200-day moving average. And I believe it influences whether the trend or industry is positive or negative. Much similarity in the charting for just a regular security. You do have the ability to export a PDF of this particular chart if you wish. And under this icon, you can actually look at previous alerts. Unfortunately, with this functionality here, you have to go through one warning at a time. You can't just say, give me all your warnings or signals one at a time. And like I showed you before, you can go back right here to the alerts view and catch any alert on this particular list. All right, so let's move on to the screener. The screener is probably the most compelling part of the Chaikin platform. As I've said a couple of times, we're really focused on idea generation. You wouldn't be a member if you didn't have some understanding of how to invest your money. As such, we would encourage you to use screening. Now, what we've done as an organization, and this is just recent, is we've put out what we call starter screens. These are screens that Dave Shulin and Dan Russo worked on themselves as an ability or as a way to enhance the product. And I'm having trouble seeing why I'm not getting, okay, the screen did load. You can see the bull swing trade. You can see the variables are filled. And what I can do now is I'll go ahead and just click to get results. So this particular screen returns now 11 results. So let's talk about the attributes of the screen. And Russell 3000 is the index. Bullish or better is the power gauge rating. Oversold. Oversold is our entry point. Money flow is 3 months high persistency, strong relative strength, and a minimum price of 10 plus a beta of between 1 and 2. Basically what you'd expect for a swing trade. So just straight out, flat, this is what you get. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these answers. Anytime you have a screener, you can simply click on a particular stock in your screener results. It'll take you into the workstation and display that stock on your chart. It does not update your active list. So let's go ahead and take a look at AutoNation. Okay, AutoNation enjoys a bullish power gauge rating. But lest I rain on their parade, it hadn't been all that long, basically this week. So that is something I don't like, and it would cause me pause. Now, as oftentimes in life, there's conflicting information. You can see the relative strength is turned over. It's gone from underperforming SPY to outperforming it. We call that a personality change. When you look at the ticker, it did foretell a slight increase in the price of the stock. You also at the same or at or about the same time see the money flow changing from red to green. And as you can see, that positive money flow did lead to the stock going up. You can see that we had an oversold buy signal. And let's go to the checklist. So here's a couple of things. Industry trend is weak, or industry strength is weak. Now, that doesn't concern me too much. It's not positive, but it's also not overwhelmingly negative and doesn't necessarily impact this particular security because of this information on the industry. Sometimes we'll have, for a brief period of time, we're going to have a disconnect in some cases. Industry data up here comes from Zacks. Industry data in here comes from S&P. So S&P, and we're normalizing and switching to one. Part of the enhancement of the product. But basically overall, looking at this, because I'm not all green, would likely take a pass on it. Again, it comes back to the fact that I have the capability in very little time to go in and do well. Now here's the next one. It has a relative, an oversold buy. Now it's oil miscellaneous. So anything having to do with oil, I'm going to be a little skeptical of. But let's look at the overbought, oversold. Well, let's look at everything in order. Money flow's been pretty good since middle of, maybe the middle of July. Power gauge has been good. Relative strength is good. So you have earnings October 24th, and it's actually looking like, yeah, well, you got a 69 cent versus 63 year over year. So a potential positive estimate. And I'll go ahead. The next step is open up the power gauge rating. And I'll look at the different elements. Price to sales is bullish, which means I'm not paying a lot for each dollar in sales. Price to book is bearish. That's not a good thing. It means I'm paying a higher price than maybe I should. Somebody's asking about how to screen for daily or weekly squeeze. We're not really set up to screen for a daily or weekly squeeze. This is the closest to a swing trade screen that we have. You may want to consult with Josh, but off the top of my head, I can't honestly think of a way to set up a daily or weekly squeeze. I'm not familiar with John Carter's terminology. If you're looking for day trading type information, we're not really set up for day trading because of the fact we only change our core functionality, the money flow, relative strength, and power gauge every day. where some of the other platforms are actually updating things like overbought, oversold. They may call it RSI. And the charting would be a little bit more detailed. Certainly we can predict through this trade or this screen stocks that may make a decent trade, but to actually set it up, well, I didn't see about follow up in the question again. I didn't see Josh's trade session. If he has a squeeze scan, I think it's asked and answered. Use Josh's squeeze scan. Josh is the trading expert. I would follow up with Josh on that one directly, just through info. Unfortunately, I don't have Josh's depth in options, and I do apologize. But sending Josh a note will get you the screen. And for everybody else on the webinar itself, it's as good a time as any for options traders to call your attention to Josh Minland's twice weekly option ideas sessions held Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, where Josh does talk quite a bit about options. Dave Shulin and I are somewhat familiar with options, but not to the level Josh is. So back to this company's power gauge. I'm evaluating whether I want to buy them. And this is the process I use. It isn't necessarily the right process. So a couple of things I don't like. Free cash flow is neutral. Long-term debt to equity is neutral. Price to book is bearish. That's enough to virtually give me pause right there. Short interest is bullish and insider activity is bullish. Those are both positives. Estimate trend is positive. Now, anything having to do with energy and oil right now scares the crap out of me. So the industry is weak. And on that basis, I might take a pass on this, or certainly I would dig a little deeper into what they do. So the point I'm getting to is just because you got this screen, it doesn't mean go into your trading platform and buy all these stocks. So let's talk about modifying the screen. Say I wanted fewer results. So I'm going to go ahead and say add a variable. Price return is at or near a 1 month low. And you can see it cuts down the list. Now, the reason I go with these two variables is oversold marks a good entry point. But if I'm at or near a 1 month low, more likely than not, you can see where, in this case, I'm much deeper into oversold. It's still not quite ready yet, I don't think. Nope, it's not ready yet, but you can see where this is much stronger than the other security. And remember, the checklist is not meant to be the end all. The checklist is meant to facilitate your review. So let's talk about this chart for a second. Well, the checklist first. Industry strength is weak. That's a reflection of telco. Again, not a huge item of fear for me. Yes, industry is important, but it's individual stocks that make or break a trade. The checklist is correctly caught up that this has not curved over yet. You can see that clearly it's oversold, but the current last overbought oversold is at 23, so 27 to 23 over the past couple of days. I want to see it turn back upward before I'm ready to go. That would turn that green, and again, industry is a little bit of a concern. Maybe I pass, maybe I wouldn't. It's not a great pick. So now, say hypothetically I wanted to save these. There's a couple things I can do. If I want to view them in the workspace, this will actually update this file with these new names. And from these new names, I'm able to maintain that list as I see fit. Now let's look at another screener. Again, this is back to the pre-made screeners, starter screens. And let's go ahead and do a classic bull. Okay, this is looking for strong stocks. So initial survey brings up 26 results. So maybe you don't want to look at 26 charts, so you think of a different variable to interject. I'll go ahead and throw in oversold here because I want to sort out of that list, what do I have that's readily tradable today? And I cut that list from 22 down to those two. I can also, again, change the stock universe. No Russell 3000 instead of the S&P. Now, I also, for a lot of times for Russell 3000, add in this market cap. And you can see now I'm back up to 6 holdings. So this is what the screener is about, taking away variables. It requires some thinking. It requires a little bit of trial and error. We're obviously in client success ready to help you. But you've really got to think about what it was about your last successful trade. What was it about that stock that made the trade successful? And I mean, what is it about the stock is specifically what's the company doing? What's the company's industries? How are its financials? I don't give a crap if somebody on the internet said buy this stock and you happen to get lucky. Rather, what was it about that stock that made you buy it? That's the foundation of what you use the screener for. But people struggle with that. People struggle very badly with that. I mean, I had the privilege of working with Larry Ellison at Oracle for 5 or 6 years and understand databases very well. Maybe you did not. And for that reason, we have these starter screens. And that was the reasoning behind the starter screens is, hey, wait a minute, we've got this great tool here, but is it something that our members can use? And let's, finally review the rest of these starters. You have classic bull or classic bear. These are for longer trades. Maybe you're thinking about holding something 3 months, 6 months, perhaps even longer. And that could be up or down. There's nothing to say you couldn't short somebody too. Swing trades are just that, swing trades. You're either looking for a move up or a move down. Now, personality changes, and let's go ahead and the system will yell at you if you don't clear your screen out. Let's spend a couple minutes on personality changes. It is an important concept. It's not the easiest thing in the world to explain, but potentially it's easier to show you. A personality change is something that looking at the stock, there's an option, there's a chance that you're identifying the beginning of an upwards trend. So take this Activision, for example. You can see that you went bullish in July. The relative strength turned in, the middle of July, it turned positive. And the stock's moving toward oversold. So maybe you've got a very good entry point, and maybe you've got a run up to here in a fairly short period of time. And this is where the personality change comes in. Negative to positive, neutral to positive, negative to positive. So you can see that relative strength, money flow, and power gauge are all turning. So let's look at another one and see if there's a clearer personality change. This is an interesting personality change. You can see power gauge turned from, it's actually been bullish starting here because you're going into neutral plus. After you got the power gauge turning bullish, you have relative strength turning over. And what's interesting that you have is something called money flow divergence. Go ahead if you're curious about money flow divergence. I don't have time in this session. Go ahead and look in the money flow section of the Chaikin Analytics public website to give you an explanation. Now, with this stock, I think this bump here was due to an acquisition, but when you have money flow moving adversely to the stock price, in other words, negative money flow in a rising stock or positive money flow in a declining stock, you have something called money flow divergence, and that's the start of a trend. You might want to check that out on Chaikin's webpage and get a better understanding of what that signal is telling you. So in my mind, the big problem with this is it's not oversold. And let's see what the checklist has to say. So you've got a power gauge is strong. You've got relative strength is strong. Overbought, oversold is neutral. So you know what you're trading into. Now, say I like this, but I'm not convinced. You know, I'm thinking, hey, there are a lot of things about this stock I like, but I'm not quite there yet. That's where discovery comes in. So I'll go ahead and go. I'll type in the symbol. Now I'll return here. Don't fall for the icons. Somebody cut and pasted code, I suspect. So what this has done is by keying in Allergan here, I've asked the system to identify similar stocks. And I've gotten this list of similar stocks, all of which, could be a better trade than Allergan, could be worse. I've also got a list of similar short candidates in case you wanted to do some sort of pairs trade. Similar bullish stocks, similar technicals, and ETFs that are holding that position in case you're buying in an ETFs. So, what this is trying to do for you is to, give you sort of an alternative. To one of the stocks you uncover in your screener. Now, once I see the screener, I can click View in the Workspace. I can also save the results. And I'll just save them, call it well, you get the point. My typing's terrible. I've never Now, what will happen with this is you will see a user list called Jack Screens right there. And it shows all the stocks that were on that screen. And I'm free to use that to start off with. Last item I want to review in my mind, make sure I've covered. Well, I haven't really dug as deep into the chart as I should. Hold for one, and let's get to a different chart. Let's get to our friends at Micron. So Micron was just actually picked as not sure who, it was either Russo or Mark Chaikin, just recently mentioned Micron. And you can see the setup right here. As we said, with Chaikin, bottom-up process. Start with the power gauge. The power gauge is really what this is all about. It's designed to predict whether the stock will outperform or underperform the market over the next 1 to 6 months. Now, outperform could mean it falls less. Let's face it, we've got a market trading in a band, and we've got a sort of a volatile situation politically right about now. So what we suggest is that you basically look starting with the power gauge. And as you can see, Micron's power gauge has been bullish for quite a while. Now, certainly they had their struggles. And I believe it was right around here that either Mark or Dan came out and recommended Micron, because I know I took a position in it. In fact, I've taken a position in it twice. But so let's look at the checklist for Micron, and you can see it's all green. We talked about relative strength, and it's really just a confirmation or how the stock's performing against the market. And one of the webinars with Jim Cramer said, characterize relative strength as the market confirms the model. I can't think of a better way to say it than Jim did, honestly. Next item up is overbought, oversold. And remember that overbought, oversold is primarily a timing indicator. It's best to enter, and this is actually a pretty good example of this turn and when you enter. So let's scroll past here. So we're definitely oversold. We're at 20.92 August 8th, down to 16.6, up to 15.4, up to 17, but then back down to 10. And up to 13. So at this point, I'd say we have our swing. I would expect that you'll get a confirmation and have this moving more toward overbought, which could indicate that you've reached another possibly favorable entry point. Now, relative strength is just above or below the market. And again, with your crosshairs, you can get a sense of what the numeric value is to compare relative strength here with relative strength there. It's basically a measure of looking at specific metrics over a period of time. From overbought, oversold, which is a hugely important timing mechanism, you go to money flow. Now, money flow is not the result of Mark Chaikin counting orders going through the brokerage houses. Money flow is rather an estimation or a proxy for institutional buying. And what money flow looks at, and this is all on our webpage, it's all money flows in the public domain. And when you do get a chance, go to www.chaikinanalytics.com, look under products, and in that drop down, there's a great article on money flow. Basically, what money flow is tracking a trading pattern. When institutions are buying or moving into a position, the traders, the portfolio management folks will come to the traders and say, hey, go get me $10 million worth of Bank of America today. Now, the traders don't want to tip their hand that they're looking for $10 million worth of Bank of America, so start placing trades slow under the radar. Normal course of business type thing. But as the day goes on, they may have more and more shares to cover, and you might notice a pattern of, end of the day volume at a higher price point during the day. That would lead to positive money flow. Likewise, if the traders are liquidating a position, you may see an increase in volume toward the end of the trading day at a lower price. Relative to the price during the day. Okay, a question. Can I please share the criteria for the screens in my account? The save screens, I don't know if you're referring to the save screens, which are all constant. Most of these screens here are junk, to be honest with you. A lot of them are examples of God knows what, and I don't even know what they're for. Best thing you do about talking about the screener is go ahead and get some time with your client success person who can help you set something up. It's not terribly effective, honestly, using my screen. I mean, I'm more than happy to share them with you. But basically what the process would be is your client success manager will talk to you about what you're screening for, what you're trying to find, and then help you set up screens. And that's certainly something we're more than happy to do. But sharing screens is almost like, well, let me not make a bad analogy. When borrowing a screen from someone else, make sure you understand that their objectives in the trade or in the screen are aligned with yours. So as moving up the chart, you've got money flow. Now I'm not a big fan of money flow. I mean, I'll look at it and, this period of time, yeah, that would have been a negative. But, the money flow moved back on this one to positive right around early June, right around the time the relative strength in the power gauge changed. So certainly those are all good trends. Within the chart itself, we have a 200-day double exponential moving average. We have an upper and lower band, and each of the bands is roughly one standard deviation above and below the 21-day moving average, which is this middle line. And that's the elements in the chart itself. Last item to talk about is, I want to talk about, two things actually. Just like you can screen for stocks, you can also screen for ETFs. Client success person would help you. We have no starter screens for ETFs at this point. We are still moving more and more into ETFs, but our functionality within an ETF is limited to those ETFs comprised of U.S. equities. If it's not made up of U.S. equities, we won't have a power gauge rating. But there is some things you can do with ETFs. What I like to do is I like to use the Etf Comparison. First thing I do is I kill this chart. Get a little tired of charts at the end of the day, like a good old-fashioned table. So what I'll use this for is I'll go ahead and go to the spider subsectors. These are great proxies for industry. And rotating in and out of them can be an effective strategy. And that, again, it reminds you of Dan's Tuesday column. So say I'm looking for an ETF based approach. And my goal is to exceed the performance of SPY, the ETF representing the S&P 500. So when I'm going to do this analysis, the first thing I want to do is deal with a time frame. Maybe over the last month, maybe I want to be active and aggressive. So over the course of the last month, Dow Jones REIT, Real Estate Income Trust Fund, Aerospace, Spider Aerospace, Spider Semi, Spider S&P Insurance, Healthcare Services, Healthcare Equipment, all outperformed SPY. And you can see by which percent. Now, the reality is only one of these stocks actually made money. Now, if you want to change your analysis to 6 months, you can then see that these numbers all actually changed and were replaced with something else. So this is a great way to compare ETFs. Now, say I've gone through that process and I've come up with a couple of sectors that are outperforming SPY. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to find strong stocks in those sectors. So what I can do is call up the screener say I want to do a swing trade in one of those sectors. Whoops, I got to get out of ETFs and move into stocks. Okay, so say I'm looking for I want to go ahead and screen by these subsectors that I located. For the sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and select. This may not be 100% accurate to what I did on Etf Comparison, but at the end of the week, it's the short-term memory that goes fast. Let's do software and services, semiconductors. I don't like banks right now. Let's do REITs. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm using the screener, and I'm using the swing trade screener to go in and screen within these subsectors for stocks that have the attributes of a bullish personality change. So maybe I want to change my mind and I want to do looking more at a swing trade. So instead of Russell 3000, select the subsector. And I'm, admitted, I'll be talking to the product people. Moving these, clicking around here is a pain in the butt. All right, so that gets me in these subsectors that are outperforming SPY. It gives me a couple of ideas. So you get the point. That's how you drive it. So at this point, that covers everything that I had hoped to get accomplished today. And thank you for joining. As always, Client Success is available to help you out whenever you're ready. Don't be a stranger, and don't be afraid to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. You're not inconveniencing us. You're not bothering us. And in fact, we want to hear from you. And if you're the least bit not sure what to do, you're starting to get a little bit frustrated, by all means, call us. We look at this all day long. We work with it all day long, and we can certainly steer you toward, functionality that will help you work through whatever your current concern is. But it does always surprise me that people act surprised that they can call. That's what you're paying for. That's part of why you pay what you pay, is to have help available for you. So we would encourage you to take advantage of that. Thank you all for your time. And, somebody trying to beat the buzzer with a question. What is the best email to reach Josh at? Go ahead and send it to info@chaikinanalytics.com and put in the subject line, please send to Josh. And that'll get it in there because info is a monitored mailbox. So if that's it for questions, everybody enjoy the weekend, and we'll be back Monday. Thanks.